Are the Knicks reinforcements about to arrive? Mitchell Robinson is practicing in full. OG Anunoby questionable to return to the Knicks' first game back from break. We're going to talk about that. Josh Hart landing on the injury report because, of course, all things can't be perfect. And then trying to plan out the fully healthy Knicks rotation, which hopefully we'll see within about the next week. So that's all coming up next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. I'm Alex Wolfe, I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And he's Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, and also the Saturday co-host of the Locked On NBA podcast. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. On today's show, we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting stuff. Mitch and OG both making strides towards returning post All-Star break. Josh Hart lands himself on the injury report, but we're going to explain why via a official doctor who's done us lots of favors with his reporting that this maybe is not something worth getting too worried about. And then we're going to talk about what a fully healthy Knicks rotation could potentially look like. But first, we wanted to thank you all for making us your first listen today and every day. Whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube, we appreciate you making us part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that auto download function on your favorite podcast app or the notification bell on YouTube so you never miss an episode. Also, though, if that's not enough for you, we also have the Locked On Knicks daily newsletter. So make sure to check that out. One stop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. That's lockedondaily.com. And start your day with the all-new free Locked On Knicks newsletter. Maybe get an alert just like that. A little ding on your phone. Set one just for us.
Did you see how I timed that, Alex? This is why they pay us the big bucks. That's pretty good, right?
Very intentional. Very intentional.
Definitely not good improv by you. Anyways, keep going.
At any rate, Gavin, we've got some new news. So coming out of the break here, Mitchell Robinson cleared for 5-on-5 practice, still listed as out for the Knicks' first game back. So not quite there yet. I think initially he was considered questionable, but then was later updated to out for this first game. So I guess they don't feel quite as good about his conditioning just yet. OG Anunoby questionable, which feels like usually the Knicks use questionable as a roundabout way to say probable and say that a guy is most likely going to play. But OG was technically listed as questionable the last couple games before the break and did not play. So maybe a true 50-50 shot that he plays in this first game back from break, but he's trending in the right direction. I don't know. How are we feeling right now about these injury updates? I'm feeling pretty encouraged. I think that Mitch is probably back within the next couple games based off how things usually go for the Knicks.
Yeah, I think far and away the single biggest thing here is that Mitchell Robinson is playing 5-on-5 because that's I think it was last episode. I talked about that a little bit, that even like I always try to really closely track the tone of Ian Begley's tweets. I will watch like his SNY post games and say like, all right, what's the tenor in his voice? And it's like going over this Zapruder film for me, because he tends to know more than he actually says and is very definitive in only going with what he is 100% sure of and not really like leaning one way or another based on reporting. I say all that to say, like, I was feeling a sense of like, yeah, they say he's coming back, but they've said that a long time. And we know Alex is a long time, people who've done this podcast for a few years. But just as far back as this summer, like the Knicks were saying like, oh yeah, you'll see Mitchell Robinson, like, like December, like he'll be back in a few months. And it kept getting pushed back. And we're just getting to a point like, are we actually going to see this guy play this year? And you could have a situation like Bojan Bogdanovic with the Nets, which is I feel terrible for the guy. Screwed the Sixers one more time. Like he had season-ending surgery after you kept hearing like, oh yeah, he's going to be back. And that has sort of been the trend with Mitch in recent years. So I was feeling a little bit of internal pessimism. And the single biggest thing is just that like he's running and he's actually taking contact, tells you that he is on a trajectory to be back very soon. So that is incredibly exciting because I miss watching Mitchell Robinson play basketball. I am extremely intrigued to see how he fits in with this team. And we're going to talk rotation a little later. Maybe we could do a lineup when he actually, or an episode when he comes back on lineups we're intrigued to see. OG Anunoby, Shams Charania had before the Celtics game that he will be back after the All-Star break. I doubted it a little bit. I'm like, well, they keep listing him as questionable. You know what? He knew better than I did. So I have a feeling he is going to play. And I think as they should, the Knicks were just very cautious with his injury. And honestly, at this point, like we can talk about it with Josh Hart too, but with Mitch also, like that should be the approach with all these guys. Like the Knicks seem very much locked into the 3 seed. I think it would actually be a good thing for them if they hypothetically fell to the 4 seed. Like, just take your time. Make sure these guys are healthy. Give them as much rest as they needed. That is my main priority the second half of the year.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think in terms of the Mitch news, you know, I think I'm pretty like of the mind that he's going to be back the next couple days as well. I mean, he's even. We know that Mitch is very active on social media and always very excited to share whatever he's doing, whether he's in the weight room or you know, whatever. But he shared a pretty definitive go time with his practice jersey the other day. So I mean, if you want to read into that, it seems like he thinks that he's ready to rock at this point. You know, and it's just going to be getting that final approval. I would assume the main thing is that they're probably just trying to make sure, like, get him through a few days of 5-on-5s, make sure that his conditioning is where it needs to be before you throw him on an NBA floor in games that you're probably hoping to win. I wonder if maybe putting him out against Chicago, it would have been fine, you know, whether he was fully conditioned or not. Like, you know, it's not exactly the cream of the crop, you know, it's not like it's a game against the Cavs or something, but you know, whatever. They're probably looking for it and saying, hey, let's make sure he is fully ready for 3 games against the Cavs, because I mean, he's the difference maker in that scenario. Like he is the guy that broke these guys' backs a couple years ago, or one of the main reasons that they had their backs broken in the playoffs by the Knicks a couple years ago. So, you know, I think that's probably their line of thinking there. OG, you know, I think we're going to reference him in the next segment too when we talk about this new heart injury. But Brian Suter, who is like a doctor that deals with sports injuries and whatever, and has a great YouTube channel where he breaks down all this stuff, you know, had mentioned with the OG injury, like when he saw it, first off, you know, solving all of our fears and you know, just comforting Knicks fans and being like, no, you know, I know that some of you think maybe this was like a huge like no contact injury, but actually look, his foot kind of goes a little awkward as he's landing, and he probably just strained his what was it, the Liz Frank tendons in between his feet. And you know, he's like, it's probably just a sprain. He had kind of said with that, you know, it's like it's like any sprain, you rest and relax it, and then you can get taped up and whatever and try to immobilize the area, and you know, you could play through it. You know, it's just pain management, physical therapy, you know, seeing what you can get through. So I kind of have I have a faith in the Knicks training staff, but I also do have kind of a faith in OG Anunoby himself as far as what his pain threshold is and what he can play through. I mean, I think I don't know. I know just from the pulse of the fan base and like his rep from Toronto and stuff, there was some worry last year about him, like, oh, he's, you know, keeping himself out. He's not playing through it or whatever, you know, with regard to the elbow or whatever. But then we saw in the playoffs, I mean, the guy like literally limped himself out there, Willis Reed style, in game 7 and tried his best to play through a clearly mangled hamstring. So I think this guy is a pretty good read on his own body and what he's capable of, and if he's able to play at the level that he wants to play at. So I don't really have too much issue with them kind of taking it slow with that. If he doesn't play this first game against Chicago, again, they're not like exactly the cream of the crop. I would hope the Knicks could get by with just their 2 all-star starters and, you know, the rest of the guys minus OG and Mitch, or possibly Hart, I guess, if that turns into anything. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about these injury updates. Like I think we'll probably be seeing them very soon, you know, if not this first game for both of them, then hopefully by the weekend or, you know, early next week, something like that. I'm not gonna lie, I don't have the schedule in front of me to know exactly when the next
so it's Boston. This is what's interesting. It's Boston Sunday, Cleveland Friday. And if I were them, I would wait until Wednesday, because then you get another 2 days, and then they play the Philadelphia 76ers. So the only fear there is that it rightfully inspires some PTSD in Mitchell Robinson. Though the last time he was on the court, he was shutting down Joel Embiid. So outside of the risk of Embiid deciding to try to pull him out of the air again, maybe Mitch just doesn't jump the whole game. I don't know. Outside of that risk, I do think that is a favorable matchup for Mitch, especially because Embiid is extremely hampered this year and is not really himself. Like that would be a good way to build some confidence versus throwing him to the wolves and letting Kristaps Porzingis rain threes on him. The alternative, of course, is you play him, which maybe is what the Knicks will do against Boston. Anyways, you play him when KP's out of the game. You let him battle with his old. I think they overlap his old practice foe, Luke Cornett. Am I wrong about that? Was Cornett off the team before he was on? I can't remember. Cornett was on it a lot. Cornett's had a nice career now, 8 years. Shout out to Luke Cornett. But that would be fine. I would just. I think the Knicks are going to do this regardless of the opponent. I would play Mitch like 10 minutes at most the first time he's out there. I would be extremely conservative with OG. Honestly, like people can tell me I'm crazy, like, and it's not the Tom Thibodeau way. I personally would probably like not play OG back-to-backs until like the last 10 games of the season when you're really trying to ramp up his cardio for the playoffs. Like I just wouldn't do it because we'll talk about it with Josh Hart. Like there are like injuries you could have literally just from overuse, and those are the ones that tend to lead to more serious injuries, which I think is why the Knicks haven't played him. But well, we can also get into the actual basketball impact, Alex, because I am just really excited. One, to see OG Anunoby play basketball again. Two, I think he's going to play really good basketball because we saw when the Knicks, like what was the stretch? It was like 2-3 weeks ago where they had 4 days off, and then OG came back and he looked like early season OG again. I have a feeling after a game to get acclimated, we're going to see that. And the Knicks, if they don't take my advice and they play him back-to-backs, I want to see that against Cleveland. I want to see how he handles Evan Mobley. I want to see how they look against the Celtics with him guarding Jason Tatum from the opening tip-off. Like I am just incredibly excited to see that dude play basketball and see if it makes any difference against these top teams. The Knicks, at least against the Celtics, have not looked very good. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Josh Hart's injury in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks.
But first, we got to let you know about our friends over at FanDuel. And when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. And there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Definitely my favorite pastime. Make a little uncut gems style same game parlay and see if it pays off. And I love using FanDuel's live betting feature too, because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. So whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. And let me tell you, the live betting, mostly useful for if you're like me and you forget to submit bets before the game starts. You still get a chance to do it even after tip-off, which is great. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Gavin, we're back in to keep talking through these injury updates, and Josh Hart finds himself on the injury report, which was not something that I guess I was expecting. He has patellofemoral syndrome in his right knee and is listed as out for Chicago. So he is not going to be in. So he's going to be, the Knicks are not going to be at full strength. Maybe
are you doing a LeBron don't fit out, fit in type deal right now? Is that where you're trending on?
Sure, something like that. But at any rate, even with Hart out here, we have our good buddy Brian Suter, MD, the YouTube doc himself, who has weighed in on Twitter and said, not a concern at all. Should be a fairly easy to load manage through the rest of the season. Essentially, it's pain that arises from poor load balance, too much or too little in the knee joint behind the kneecap. Very common, treated with physical therapy and sometimes taping and bracing. Very rare to need more aggressive treatments. So it seems like Hart's going to be fine. It's got the Suter seal of approval for not a crazy injury here, but load management mentioned here, which you just mentioned with OG. So I don't know. Maybe we're going to have to see in this back half of the season as the Knicks get ready for the playoffs. And as you said, like they are, I don't want to say fully locked into the 3 seed, but like they're in really good shape. There's not nearly as much this year in the East as there was last year, where the Knicks were scrapping until practically the final day of the season and ended up with the 2 seed, but could have just as easily been like the 6 seed, like 2 days prior. There's not really any of that energy going on right now in the East. It's very top heavy. It's like the Cavs and then the Celtics, like 5 or 6 games behind them. And then the Knicks 3 games behind the Celtics. And then like a 5-game delta between them and the Pacers in the next spot there. So pretty disparate standings here, and it does sort of offer the Knicks this opportunity to load manage, to get their guys fully healthy and try to get this thing ready for the playoffs, I think.
Yeah, look, we talked about it a little bit last episode. I think the Celtics have either the 3rd or 4th easiest remaining schedule in the NBA. The Knicks did get through a chunk of their hardest games. If you remember, about a month ago, we were discussing the fact that they have the hardest remaining schedule in the NBA. At this point, they have the 8th hardest remaining schedule in basketball. But I say that to say, unless Jason Tatum, like we're obviously not rooting for, suffers some kind of major injury, like I don't really see a realistic shot where you're going to catch the Boston Celtics. So take advantage of that. Like, sit your guys, or even better than sitting your guys, Tom Thibodeau. Like if we wanted like jump ahead and get into the rotation a little bit, like play them a reasonable amount of minutes, because you just don't have to win every regular season game. And the goal right now should not be to win every regular season game. It should be 1, get everyone to April healthy. 2, mess around with the rotation a little bit and see if this starting lineup that has just been mediocre, like if you can find a better version of it. And here's the thing, like that because I know I've talked about that a lot, so I won't belabor the point. Like if you can experiment, and maybe it turns out like, hey, Deuce McBride doesn't really hold up in starter minutes. Like Karl-Anthony Towns, Mitchell Robinson doesn't really work. Like the spacing is just too damn bad. But at least and so often with Tibbs, I feel like we don't get to that point until they run into a team in the playoffs, and he just like the first year of Brunson and Hart, where he just realized like I cannot really have Hart on the floor because he can't shoot the basketball right now, and too often the Knicks only hit that, or even before that, like Elfrid Payton, like he's unplayable in the playoffs, at least as a starter. And so often Tom Thibodeau only reaches that revelation when the Knicks are too far down in a series. So just get to April. I don't care if they're the 3 seed. I personally would prefer if they were the 4 seed, because I think the Cleveland Cavaliers are beatable, and I'm excited to hopefully see some evidence of that on Friday, Alex. But just find a way to get to April, and like the OG Anunoby injury, I think was a warning sign from the basketball gods. And sometimes you don't get warning signs. Sometimes it's a torn Achilles, and it's like, whoops, I shouldn't have played those guys so much. But I think with OG and now with Josh, like what we're getting is a blinking red light saying, hey, your fire detector needs new batteries. Put them in before there's an actual fire. So maybe that's a bad analogy. I don't know, but that is absolutely where my head is at, and I'll stop talking about it because I think I've driven that point home about as much as I can.
Yeah, well, my only real worry, I mean, I do actually strategically the idea of going for the 4 seed as well, because I would much rather face the Cavs in the second round than the Celtics in the second round, and that seems like, unless the Cavs like really fall off down the stretch of the regular season here, it doesn't seem like they're going to cede that lead to Boston. I mean, they're currently 5.5 games up, which we're talking about the Knicks roughly being locked in as the 3 seed at the moment, and like they're 5.5 games up on Indy. So like, same vibes. It feels like the Cavs would really have to screw it up to not end up the 1 seed at this point. And obviously, based off the history between the 2 teams, I think the Knicks have a much better chance at the Cavs in the second round than they would against the Celtics. That said, like if they actively start trying to get that 4 seed, that is where you get into that dangerous territory of like, if one of the 2 or 1 or 2 of like the planned wins that you had on your schedule don't turn into schedule wins, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, now there's a chance we might end up the 6th seed or something. And I don't think you want to cede that first round home court advantage. Like, I think that is That is, key. And the thing that you work really hard for throughout the season. I mean, obviously, if you can get home court for as long as you possibly can, that's awesome. But just getting it for that first round, I think is something that the Knicks should be striving for. And then those standings in the 4 to 6, 7, 8 range is where things get a little tighter, where things are only decided by a game or two. I don't think you want to risk potentially putting that on the line. So unfortunately, they might just kind of be locked into this matchup.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm not advocating for any kind of active tanking. I'm just saying do not play which seems like they're not doing. Don't play Josh Hart through this knee injury and be like, well, we got to make a run at the 3 seed. Like, just let the guys rest as long as they need to, and let the chips fall where they may. Is all I'm advocating for.
Yeah, no, and I'm with that too. I don't know if I don't think I'm quite on the same level as you as far as like overuse leading to serious injuries, like a ACL tear or something. I think those are generally just kind of like injuries.
Well, here's the thing: you can't tear your ACL if you're not on the court. So that is what I fall back on. Whether however much because I know there is very mixed data on if overuse leads to severe injury, but I always keep it as basic as that, and I think that is hard to argue.
Yeah, and I think that load management would be prudent, but also because it's. I mean, you sort of alluded to this, and this is probably a good segue to get into our next segment, which is talking about, what the rotations might start looking like here. But, it's a good way then if you're strategically resting some guys down the stretch and letting their injuries, giving them because sitting a guy on a back-to-back with how the schedule is, I mean, the Knicks still have, I think, the most back-to-backs in the NBA for the rest of the season. They have like 6 more or something, which is crazy.
It's all 3 times they play the Cavs are back-to-backs, which kind of sucks.
Which stinks, yeah. But then you also have, the plus side of that is that then you end up with more of those longer breaks. So now you've set yourself up in a situation where you can start giving guys multiple days off in between. And if you want to get them ready for the playoffs, that is the way, because in the playoffs, you always get a couple days rest in between games. So, there's no back-to-backs once you get to the playoffs. So it's not like you have to play these guys on back-to-backs to get them ready for the playoffs. Anyway, let's talk about that in the next segment. Let's get into the rotation discussion and all that, and we'll close this thing out with hopefully planning the rest of the Knicks season in a way that makes it so they can win a bunch of games and go into the playoffs strong. All right, Gavin, we're back in to keep talking through this rotation discussion now that the Knicks are almost fully healthy. We're to the point where we can start thinking about, hey, against some of these, in some of these big matchups against Cleveland or Boston that they still have left, we might be able to see a full strength Knicks team out there. I know this isn't the first time that we discussed this, but it's the first time that we've gotten to really discuss it with the realistic goal of everybody being healthy and available in sight. We're finally within striking distance to be able to actually talk about this is a realistic possibility. But I guess assuming that you have a full deck of cards on any given night, what are you thinking as far as how this rotation is going to go once you reintegrate Mitchell Robinson, get OG Anunoby there, still have then you have a full bench of Campaign available, Landry Shamet, Precious Achiuwa, Deuce McBride, obviously off the bench, plus Mitchell Robinson now. I think there's a lot of possibilities, and I think that Tibbs is going to have an interesting conundrum on his hands as far as how to plan this whole thing out. And possibly, I mean, for the man that loves the word situational, could have a lot of situational lineups that he could throw out there, which could be really useful as long as he's willing to deploy them enough to get them ready for the postseason and stuff.
All right. So first, I'm gonna take the power. I'll give you how I would deploy these guys, and then we can get into how it is actually going to go. Which unfortunately, Alex, in this business, when you're following Tom Thibodeau, you don't often get what you want, and I don't think I'll get what I want. But here is what I would do. Rotation was, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm throwing it up on the screen. I would get into a scenario where you're not playing anyone more than 34 minutes. Again, in the playoffs, this changes, but in the regular season, I don't see a reason for it, and I'll explain why here. Your starting lineup would be Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns. I would play Brunson 32 minutes. I would give Campaign the remaining 16 minutes at the point guard spot. I would play Deuce McBride 30 minutes at the 2. I'd play Josh Hart 18 minutes at the 2. I'd play Mikal Bridges 34 minutes at the 3. Josh Hart 14 at the 3. So total of 32 minutes for Josh. So he doesn't start, but he still plays 32 minutes a game. OG Anunoby 32 minutes. What a world that would be. Karl-Anthony Towns 4 minutes at backup power forward. Precious Achiuwa 12 minutes at backup power forward. And then at center, Karl-Anthony Towns 30. So 34 total for Cat. 18 minutes for Mitchell Robinson. That might even be a little high if you want to add 2 minutes to Cat. You want to add 2 minutes to Precious. That is fine. But I think that is the goal for me, that Mitchell Robinson, by the time he reacclimates, is a 15 to 20 minute a game guy, and you're not playing anyone more than 34 minutes. Is that going to happen? Hell no. That is not what is actually going to happen. I think more likely we see a scenario that is just pretty close to what it's been all year, where we're pretty much all 5 starters. Maybe OG they're a little more cautious with, but I think all 5 starters probably play something like 36 minutes a game, and you see Mitchell Robinson incorporated, which I'm really curious your take on this. Do you think there's a world where with Mitch back they cut it all? Because what I presented was an 8-man rotation. Is there a world where they cut it all the way down to 7 and maybe remove Precious Achiuwa entirely? Because if you're willing to play Cat like 38 minutes, like there's a world where you could say, all right, Mitch, you get you get like 10 at center, you get 8, 9, 10 at power forward, and you could only play 7. I think Tibbs will try to keep Precious involved because he obviously really likes Precious, but I'm curious to see like the cascade effect of Mitchell Robinson being back. And then beyond that, like everything else probably stays about the same.
Yeah, I thought, did you have a 9-man rotation?
I had maybe my math was bad.
I thought it was
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. No, I did have a 9-man rotation. Yeah. So I guess I was good math. I guess I was advocating for Tibbs maybe going down to 8. Man.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say if what you listed is like a regular season rotation, then I agree. I think what we're gonna see is possibly, as long as things go well with Mitch, I think Tibbs is probably, unfortunately, gonna knock Precious out of the rotation. I mean, we saw that. We saw the role that Precious played last year during the regular season, and he stepped up huge for guys, when guys were injured and whatever. But we did ultimately see he was not a guy that Tibbs trusted once it hit playoff time necessarily. Like, he played some minutes when necessary. Obviously, there were so many injuries and everything, but when presented an opportunity to not have to play him as much, Tibbs didn't. Especially that first round series against Philly, like Precious was not much of a factor when Mitch was still out there. I think that's probably the direction that things will go. I think that Tibbs, based off past returns, will probably be very intrigued by the Cat and Mitch alignment. I think that he's going to want to go to that fairly often. I know. I don't know for sure, but I feel fairly certain that he would not want to do something like a Precious and Mitch lineup.
Yeah.
I say that with all the hope in the world, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe he does actually want to go with that. I think hopefully he will realize, like, hey, you need spacing out of one of those 2 spots, and Precious ain't it. As much as he can hit a 3 every once in a while, like, no team is respecting him. It's going to clog things up, and no matter who you have out there with them, their lives are going to be harder as a result, because they're not going to have that space getting inside. They're not going to have the at least one of those 2 guys to kick to on the perimeter for like an easy open 3, or you run the risk of then potentially having a scenario where teams are just letting Precious take like 6 threes per game, and he just doesn't make any of them, or he just drives into a bunch of traffic, because his instinct generally, I think, is to only take the 3 if he's like wide open, and then otherwise he tries to put it on the floor. And then he's fairly good at finishing in the right scenario, but is not like an elite finisher. Anyway, so hopefully he's not going with that. I think that's going to result in Shamet probably being out of the rotation once playoff time comes. As much as earlier in the season, I was hoping that he would assert himself enough to get a few minutes here and there. the shot just hasn't come around enough. Ironically, everything but the shot has been pretty good for Shamet. Like, I've liked his defense a lot. I've been very impressed with it. You know, the ability to put it on the floor and get inside, we saw, you know, a couple times recently, him flashing that skill. But I think that he's kind of, once we hit the time when the games matter the most, he's going to kind of just be a break in case of emergency option. I think Precious is going to end up going the same way with that. And you're mostly just going to see Campaign, Deuce McBride, and Mitchell Robinson as your options off the bench later in the season. Now, what that works out to in terms of minutes, I mean, we'll see. I think it's based off what we now know about the injuries, what we were just talking about, it becomes a little more difficult to start planning the rest of the regular season rotation, because I do think Tibbs will hopefully listen to the training staff and whatever. And, you know, if Josh Hart has this injury, which, I mean, it is a little concerning to me that he is missing the first game coming back from the All-Star break. Like that,
yes. Yeah.
that should be the time when everybody is coming back, you know, roughly full strength. And yet he's missing the first game coming back from the All-Star break. That's a little concerning. OG Anunoby, you know, again, dealing with a sprain or strain or whatever you want to call it. Like, those injuries are generally just, they need to be healed with rest and relaxation. Like, that's it. Like, the more strain you put on it, the more, you know, chance there is that, like, for anyone that's ever twisted their ankle, for example, all ligaments work the same. You know, it's they're semi-rigid, you know, they're flexible, but, you know, they can break. It's like a very taut rubber band kind of, you know, and they can break, they can bend plenty, you know, and sort of like if you take like a cheap metal spoon, like you can bend it, you know, over and over, but it's going to get weaker the more you bend it, you know, so you need to kind of allow that time to strengthen up again and get back to full health. And, you know, obviously he has a professional training staff and everything else, but there's a real case for not playing OG, you know, like you said, not on back-to-backs, or, you know, make sure he has a couple days rest between each game for, you know, for PT and everything. It's very un-Tibbs like, but, you know, you could almost argue that this is a very un-Tibbs like roster in the sense that Tibbs has always had to just milk every little drop of, you know, whatever he can get out of any given, you know, roster that he has. And this is one of the first rosters that seems fairly contender ready for him, like probably since like his Bulls days, you know. I'd say like every other team has felt like they've had to kind of like go uphill, you know, and just keep pushing uphill the whole time. Whereas this team feels like if they hit the right stride and they can integrate these guys, like get Mitchell Robinson comfortable again and whatever, he'll have a full deck of cards enough to say like, hey, if you play this right, like you might actually have a shot at a championship this year. So I think the load management is going to be key. Sort of a cop out. You know, I know that you went through and did the whole exercise and put the minutes together, but it's hard for me to even like fathom that right now with where the team is at with the injuries and everything. And I think that my number one hope is just that Tibbs considers all of that and puts together rotations that make sense, gives plenty of looks at different things in case injury strikes at some point, in case you have to break in case of emergency and bring a Landry Shamet in for 20 minutes in the playoffs or something. At least have lineups that he's comfortable in, know what he's good with, whatever. And I think he has done a fairly good job of doing that since Shamet has come back. But, you know, doing the same with Mitchell Robinson, trying out lots of different things, seeing what works, getting these guys comfortable with each other in many different configurations. To me, that's the most important thing going down the stretch of the season, as well as just getting these guys as healthy as they can possibly be for the playoffs, obviously.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to get at. Just like experimentation, like maybe you discover a fit that you didn't think fit. And I am deeply, and maybe should have gotten to this earlier in the episode, I'm really curious for this first game if we finally get to see what Deuce in the starting lineup looks like, because we just have not, because of the way Tom Thibodeau rotates, like we have barely gotten any minutes all year of Brunson, Deuce, Mikal, Anunoby, Cat. And that is like, again, like that's a version of the starting lineup that I think we both thought like had a credible argument to begin this year, because you talk about like the upshot of having Karl-Anthony Towns is that you can get to 5-out spacing. And because of Josh Hart, the Knicks like only with the bench units ever actualize 5-out spacing. And we've seen those lineups. Like we've seen the lineup of Campaign, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Karl-Anthony Towns, like be dominant at times. Like that is the best that Cats looked all year. That was, I'm pretty sure that was a lineup verbatim that ripped apart the Minnesota Timberwolves in that second quarter. And that is with Campaign out there. Imagine how good that could look with Jalen Brunson. I think this is such a golden opportunity, and especially against a team like the Bulls, where you know what, Tom, if it doesn't work, you can pivot, and I guess they've lost to the Bulls twice, so maybe I'm wrong about this, but you should be able to pivot and still win that basketball game. So I'm hoping that with Josh Hart out, I am desperately hoping we get that instead of the super big, super cramped version with Precious out there and Tibbs licking his lips like this is the biggest we're going to be all year. And Mikhail's going to be a 2, OG's going to be a 3. I really hope we get that 5-out lineup. I hope we get something similar against the Cavs, because I don't know about you. It would be encouraging if Josh Hart came back. It's all right, maybe they just didn't want to push him too much coming off the All-Star break. I almost would be a little surprised if we see Josh Hart now, given that he's out this first game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. So maybe we get 2 games of that, but I want to see OG Anunoby get the start at the 4, let him guard, I don't even know, I guess Patrick Williams and the Bulls. That doesn't matter, but let him guard Evan Mobley against the Cavs, who, if I remember correctly, he did a really good job against in his minutes in that 3rd game of the year. And to me, that will be the key, because I don't see Precious Achiuwa as much as I love the guy. Evan Mobley's bulked up. His shot has been much better this year. I don't see Precious having a great chance of succeeding in that matchup. Give OG Anunoby the try there. Give him the try against Jason Tatum, another matchup I just do not see Precious Achiuwa succeeding in. Let him play the 4, whether or not Josh Hart is out there. That is my one ask, Tom Thibodeau. And then for Mitchell Robinson, we can get into this more maybe Monday or Tuesday if we don't already see him. I don't know what you're looking for specifically. I'm just hoping that the movement is good. We've heard that he's in great shape. I'm hoping he looks I'm hoping he looks lean. I'm hoping he looks good running up and down the court. Would just be nice to see him throw down some dunks, get some blocks, and then just get him out quickly. Doesn't have to play more than 6 to 8 minutes. But anyways, that is about it for this edition of the Locked On Knicks podcast. He's Alex. I'm Gavin Schall. We are going to talk to you after we see the Knicks on Thursday night. Until then, be good, and we'll talk to you soon on Locked On Knicks.